You know, I'm beginning to wonder what exactly I was thinking when I decided to buy this, because this thing is enormous. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're finally taking a look at the HasLab Ghost, and here you can see some of the action figures that come with this. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, so this was a HasLab crowdfunded project, which I participated in. So it cost $600, including the shipping. Here you can see Ahsoka and Hera here on the box. And panning over here, you're going to see my Mando figure, just for scale. So you can see how tiny he is by comparison to this box. So really awesome looking packaging. And I'm very excited to finally get this open. It's a really kind of epic action figure vehicle. Now here we're looking at the top of the box. And you can see they've got some really nice images on here too. So they did a lot of really fantastic photography for this. So here you can see some of the characters on the interior of the vehicle, and they also show the Phantom II, which is included, and also some really nice shots of them outside of the vehicle. And here you can see the back of the box. So this is, they did sort of this line art, kind of black and white treatment, very reminiscent of the way things were done on original Kenner action figure vehicles way back in the day. Kind of like this. It's very much a throwback to that early era of Star Wars toys. So that's really cool. And it mirrors the imagery on the front of the box. So here you can see one of the sides of the box. And once again, they've done that sort of black and white line drawn imagery. And I think that looks really cool. Here you can see the bottom of the box and some more really fantastic photographs of the action figures with the vehicle. There's also a close-up of the engines, more of the interior of the ship, and there again is the Phantom II. Really cool looking imagery. Yeah, I think they did great on the packaging. Here you can see the other side of the box. So the text is kind of flipped a little bit, so it reads a little bit differently from the other side, but overall pretty similar in terms of the imagery. So inside of that box, there are 4 individual boxes that are done in like this sort of brown cardboard, but still have the vintage collection logo on it, and also more of that line drawing imagery of the Ghost. Also includes this instruction kind of pages, which helps in terms of getting the thing assembled. So in terms of reviewing this vehicle, I'm going to start with the contents of what I call box number 1. So in the instruction sheet, I can show you, they have the 4 boxes labeled here on this page. So I'm going to label this top one box number 1. So I have everything out in my review area from this box. So, and then box number 2 contains the 4 action figures, which I've already reviewed on my channel. And the largest box contains the actual main hull of the Ghost, including all the interior. And then the bottom box actually contains other pieces of the hull and also the gun turret that sits on top. So we're going to call this one box number 1. So and it has a lot of stuff, including a lot of the smaller parts. So I want to go through each of these and do close-ups of everything, because I noticed when other people have actually reviewed this vehicle, they haven't really gone into a lot of detail of the individual pieces. Many of the channels show assembling it, but they don't really show the unassembled pieces too much. So I want to go through these, and we'll start over here with the landing gear. So 2 of these landing gear are actually identical. So these 2 right here. So these are both labeled 54 on each one. So those are basically interchangeable. I don't think there's any real significant difference between them. I think it's the same mold used for both. And then this landing gear is the tall one, and this is labeled 53. You can see right there. So that's what that looks like. The bottom of these includes some tread on each one. So that's really cool. We'll end up installing those on the vehicle at some point. And then this one is shorter. So this also has a specific location where it needs to go on the ship. Some nice detailing on these, so I'm pretty happy overall with the look of these. And next up, we're going to take a look at the Phantom. Now, I've actually done a independent video on this particular ship, so I don't want to go into too much detail about it here, because I've covered it pretty thoroughly in my other video. So I'll put a link in the description for anyone who hasn't watched that video. It's already up on my channel, so you can take a look at that. And then this part right here is the front portion with the windows of the Ghost. So this actually fits on top of the completed ship. And there is some detail on the interior of this too. There's some texture here. This is done in the clear plastic, so it gives the illusion that this is actually having texture on the interior. And there's also this sort of drop-down display. So that's really cool looking. I really like how they've treated this, and it's got some nice detail on it, some weathering and so forth. So that looks really cool. Next up, we'll take a look at the engines. So this is the dual engine. I believe this sits in the center of the back of the spaceship, and they did do these as translucent plastic inside. So you guys who are customizers who'd like to light up your ships, they made it so it's possible. So you could wire in LED lights, and you'd have to take this all apart, obviously, in order to do that. But I believe it's held together with screws, so there must be a way to actually get this thing apart. Yeah, you can see a screw hole right there. So, and then this attaches to the back of the spaceship. So really nice detailing on this. I really like that kind of green glow that they put on the weathering. That looks really awesome, and I love all these tubes and so forth. And then there's two other engines. So there's this one. So I'm not sure if this is the left or the right, but once again, they've got that translucent plastic inside of here. So yeah, you'd be able to wire up lights and actually have this thing light up. And you can see the screw holes that make that possible to disassemble this. So again, really nice detailing on this, and that looks very cool. And that's where it plugs into the ship. And there's another one of these large engines here, and similar detailing on this to the other engine. And I really love just all the weathering and stuff that they did on these. So there's certain aspects of the ship that are not weathered as much as this, but this looks really good. So I'm actually legitimately pleased with the overall look of these. So that's very cool. And then I got two other pieces of the hull. So I believe this is probably the left side piece of the hull, and you can see some weathering done along in here. So that looks very cool. Just some minimal paint details. I think this is at the top portion, and then underneath you've got this sort of exposed area. This could probably use a little bit more weathering just in terms of bringing out the detail of that. And there's basically nothing on here, so that's kind of interesting. So I know there's been some criticism from certain people who think it should be weathered more, but you know, I'm not going to criticize too much about that. So, because if I want to, at some point, I can always add weathering. So this is where it plugs into the side of the hull, and you can see there's clips that clip it onto the sort of centerpiece that goes there. So, and this is the other side. I believe these go in the front of the ship on either side. You can see where that plugs in, and similar detailing on here. Some detailing on the top of it and along the side. So that looks really cool. And again, another exposed area. So, and I believe that's on the bottom of the ship. It must be, because you can see the screw holes. So they wouldn't put that on the top of the ship. So that's definitely the underside. There's also this little cannon, which actually attaches underneath in the front of the ship. So, and this actually adjusts up and down, and presumably this rotates. So that's that little thing, and it's got some nice detail on it as well. So that looks cool. And then for the interior of the vessel, they provided a table where multiple characters could sit down. So you can see what that looks like. Not a ton of detailing on it, but that's very cool. And actually, when I pulled this out of the package, it was actually wedged into a plastic bubble. And I was a little nervous when I pulled it out because it was wedged in there very tightly. But I was able to remove it without breaking it, so that's cool. These are chairs, I believe, which I think sit around the chess table. So there's two of those, and I believe they're pretty much identical. I don't think there's any difference between those two. And then here you can see the holographic chessboard. This is similar to the one that's in the Millennium Falcon, that memorable scene where the droids are playing holographic chess with Chewbacca. So that's from the original movie. And then there's one other chair. So this is sort of like a handmade kind of thing. And I don't recall which character sits in this particular chair, but it looks pretty cool. There's quite a bit of paint detail here on the seat, and so that looks awesome. So yeah, that's all the contents from box number 1. So let's move on to box number 2. So box number 2 actually contains the 4 action figures. So you can see that's indicated here. It's the skinny box, second from the top. So that just had them packed in there. And I already opened these and done a review on them. That's a separate video. So if you want to see all the details of what these action figures look like, just go ahead and watch that video. I'll put a link in the description. And I will be featuring these action figures at some point when I talk about the interior of the ship in particular, or different aspects of it, because I want to see how these characters interact with the Ghost, because it is as much a playset as it is a vehicle. So it's really nice to have these action figures. So let's move on to box number 3. So box number 3 contains the main hull of the ship, and I'm going to cover that more extensively when we actually talk about the interior of the vessel, because I'm going to do a lot of coverage of that, including featuring a number of the action figures. So, but I did pull off the 2 top pieces so I can take a look at these up close. So this is the docking port for the Phantom, and I've actually featured that in that Phantom video, so that's already up on my channel. And you can see some of the detail on this. So they did quite a bit of painting on this. Not a ton of weathering, but there is a little bit here and there. And then on the underside, you can see they did quite a bit of detail in here as well. So you can see, yeah, it's all detailed. So that's very cool. They didn't kind of cut corners in terms of the sculpting. And we'll feature this again when we take a look at the entire ship. So, and then you can see this panel sits in front of that. And this also has some painting detail on it. Not a ton of weathering, just a little bit. And then on the underside of this, there's also more detailing. So this would be sort of the ceiling of the interior of the Ghost. So that looks really cool. I'm very excited that they actually did quite a bit of sculpting in terms of the overall detail. So those 2 pieces are really cool. And once again, I will feature them again when we take a look at the main hull of the ship. Now let's move on to box number 4. Okay, so here we have the contents of box number 4, and you can see these are some large pieces of the hull. So you can see what's included here. Also includes the top gun turret. So we'll take a look at that first, actually, because this is really cool. This part is actually removable, this part on top, so you can actually take that off. So the clear dome. And you can see a seat in there and also some controls for the gun. The gun does move up and down as well, so that's really cool. And you can see some rungs of a ladder. So this would be where someone would climb into position in order to man this gun. And underneath you can see what that looks like as well. So very cool looking. And I'm going to go ahead and see if we can fit Zeb in here. He's the largest of the action figures. And I think they do picture him in the instructions sitting in this position. So, yeah, I believe that's Zeb right there. So let's see if we can get him to fit in here. Okay, we got him in there. And he is holding on to the handles of the gun, too. So it's a little bit of a tight squeeze, you know, and you do have to fiddle around with it to get his hands oriented correctly so he can hold on to the gun. Now, we'll see if the bubble will fit over top of his head. Let's test that. And it does. So that's awesome. They made this big enough so it would accommodate the largest of the characters that are included with the Ghost. So that's very cool. I'm very excited about that. So there are no limitations in terms of what you can do with this particular section of the ship. One more thing I wanted to mention about this gunner station, this rotating turret. The position of the seat is actually adjustable, so to accommodate different characters. The initial setting is here, indicated by the side slider, and that's to accommodate Zeb, but it actually can be adjusted to accommodate different characters. Like for Ezra, you can actually just push up on it and it raises up the seat a little higher, so it can accommodate a character that's shorter than Zeb. So that's a really nice feature. I'm glad they included that, and I just wanted to mention it because it is kind of an important feature. Now let's take a look at some of these pieces of the hull. So this is the underside. You can see because it's got the screw holes. So this is what it looks like on the top side. And you can see they did some paint details and so forth, a little bit of weathering. Some nice sort of washes were done to kind of highlight all these details. Could they have done more? Sure, but I actually am fairly satisfied with that. And I may end up customizing it myself at some point. We'll see what happens in the future. And you can see where it attaches to the ship. So you can see these two things lock in. And there's also this clip, like I showed you on the other front portion. So these ones go on the rear. So you can see there's another clip there. So it clips into this part. And you can see this is the other side. Similar detail on this. So they've done some washes on that. Not as much detail on the bottom. And then on the top, pretty similar in terms of weathering and paint details. So that's very cool. And then this is one of the side pieces. So this is a doorway, I think, to represent a door, which would be where you would dock onto another ship when you're in space. So you can see some detailing here on the top, and this is where those pieces clip in, so on either side. So you can see what that looks like. And this also has two attachment points that lock into the side of the ship. So that looks very cool. And here's the other side. Once again, this is the top portion of it, and this also includes a docking port door on this side as well. Pretty similar in terms of overall detail to the other piece, and overall these look really good, and I'm very happy with what HasLab did in terms of executing these parts of the ship. So I'll be interested to see what these look like when matched up with the main hull. So here I'm going to show you how to install the landing gear. You just have to remove these little panels from the bottom of the ship because the landing gear can't go in unless you get them out of the way. So there are 4 of those. So I recommend using like a little screwdriver or something you can kind of wedge under the back of it so that it comes off easy. So here you can see I'm putting the landing gear into position. Eventually I will have to push down on these very firmly, but I'm just getting them ready, putting them in the proper position. The lowest landing gear goes on the front, and then the high one goes all the way in the back. And you really have to apply quite a bit of pressure to get those to go in. So I did that off screen. Now I'm flipping it over, and you can see the landing gear installed, and then you can start to see what the interior of the ship looks like. So here I'm showing you there's a ramp that deploys in the front of the ship, and that opens up into a compartment. And that compartment actually connects to the cockpit. Here you can see I'm rotating the front guns and also the gunner position. They rotate independently from each other. They're not connected. This also goes up and down, so that's really cool. Now here I'm showing you how that thing connects. You can see the yellow ladder all the way at the back of that. So that yellow ladder comes up into the cockpit. So there is a passageway between there. It's a very tight squeeze, but yeah, you can get action figures up and down through there. Now I'm going handheld on this. There's really no other way to kind of film this. So I'm panning over the top of the ship, and you can see the cockpit. And there's the top of that ladder that goes down into that compartment. Here you can see some of the crew quarters. There's 2 different crew quarters. There's one with 1 bunk and another one that has 2 bunks. Now here I'm showing you how these top of the bunks are actually removable. This one has like curtains. I believe that's supposed to be Hera's quarters. And over on the other side, you can see this one comes off as well. And that's what that looks like. Now continuing on over the top of the ship, here we move back into this section. So this has a number of different features. I have yet to put in any of the individual pieces like the chairs and so forth. I just wanted to show you some of the various stations. I think that part on the right is probably like a kitchen kind of area. And over here you can see the seating, which bends around where the chess table is. Panning back forward, you can see a little more detailed look at this area of the crew quarters. Getting into the front, you can see some of the detail in the cockpit. Now coming from the back of the ship, you can see some of the intricate details, not only on the back, but also on the top before you get into the crew section. And you can see over here on the left-hand side, there's like, I'm guessing maybe like a communication station or something like that, maybe a computer terminal. Once again, here's the other side of another viewpoint of the crew quarters. And then going forward, we'll take a look at the cockpit. And you can see there are those 4 chairs, and those do rotate. So You'll see a little bit more of that later in the video. And here we're looking at the other side of the cockpit. Again, just a ton of detail in this ship. Here's Hera's quarters again, and you can see some of the detail there. Looking straight down, there's quite a bit going on in there. And then going into the back once again, you can see there's that station with a chair again. I believe it's probably a computer terminal or a communication station, I'm not sure. But overall, the interior ship is pretty incredible, and we're going to get some figures in here so you can see what that looks like. So here you can see I've actually put all the figures that come with this in here now, and also Sabine and Chopper in here as well. And you can see one of the Loth cats there. And you can see that table in position there, and Sabine is sitting there at that terminal. And you can see Kanan is actually taking a nap, so that's kind of cool. And then over in here, you can see Chopper is operating some of the stuff on the wall, so that looks awesome as well. And here you can see Hera is in the pilot seat, so and she can hold on to both of those controls. And here you can see Zeb in the front gunner station. So here we get another perspective. You can see Kanan there in the front gunner station, more of the cockpit, and you can see how those chairs rotate around. Over here you can see Sabine is taking a nap now in one of the bunks, and you can see that Loth cat. And here in the back you can see I've got several characters. I've got Ezra alongside Zeb, and there you can see Hera kind of having a conversation with Chopper. So they all look really great, and they really bring this aspect of this toy to life. It really is as much of a playset as it is a vehicle. And here's one more perspective. So we've got 3 characters here in the cockpit, so that looks really cool. And going to the back, you can see Chopper is in the hallway headed towards the cockpit. And in the back, we can have a conversation here between Kanan and Ezra. And he's sitting on one of the extra stools, so you can see those are included as well. Really cool looking on the interior. So here you can see I'm assembling the ship, and this is where the instructions come in handy because each of the individual parts is marked and indicated where they all go. So that comes in very useful when you're actually putting this thing together. Overall, the assembly was not that difficult. I did make one precaution because I don't currently have an area in my living space where I can actually display this thing. So I wanted to make sure after I assembled it that I could easily disassemble it. I had heard from a number of people that they were having difficulty trying to disassemble their Ghost after they put it together. And so what I did is I actually took an X-Acto knife and kind of just took a little bit off of each of the connector things on the hull of the ship. So just sort of shaving away a little bit so that the connections were not going to be so tight that you wouldn't be able to take it apart again. Because I definitely need to take it apart again and eventually put it back in the box because I just don't have a place where I can actually display it. And eventually I hope I will have an area where I can display it, but it is really large and there's really no convenient way to kind of, make space for it at the moment. So yeah, ultimately it will be going back in the box in the pieces it came in. And that'll be kind of nice actually to keep it that way, at least for a time, because if it's in the box, it means it won't be accumulating dust. As many of you know who are collectors, dust is the enemy for any collection. So if I'm keeping it in the box for now, it means it's not going to be accumulating dust. Overall, this assembly was pretty easy, and as you can see, I'm snapping together parts, and yeah, it went together pretty well. So now you can see the ship is fully assembled, and so for scale, I decided to sit some of the action figures on top of it so you can get a sense of how enormous this is, because each of those characters is roughly 3 3/4 inches tall. And so you can see Sabine is there. I put Ezra in the gunner station, and then you can see Kanan sitting on the side of the ship there. And then over here in the gunner station up front, I have Zeb Aurelius. And so he looks really cool in there, and you can see him. You got to shine a light through there to actually see him, but yeah, you can see him through the bubble. And then panning over here, you can see Chopper and Hera standing in front of the ship, and you see that door is open, that sort of loading dock area. The ramp is deployed, and that looks really cool. Here you can see another perspective. So this is looking at the ship from the back, and you can see those really fantastic engines. They really did an amazing job just in terms of all the weathering and so forth and the detailing that they did. not only on the engines themselves, but also in the area where they attach. So just tons and tons of extra detail. Here you can see Hera standing underneath the ship alongside there was Chopper. And then panning up over top of the ship, you can see Sabine. She's sitting on the Phantom II. So you can kind of get a sense of the scale based on her sitting there. And over here, we've got Kanan sitting on this side of the ship. And then once again, you can see Ezra is in that gunner station. So overall, I think the detailing looks really good on this, especially on the top of the ship. They didn't do a ton of weathering, but I think they did just enough, because they didn't really think they should overdo it. But I think it looks great. That's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more reviews of Star Wars action figure vehicles and playsets, you should think about subscribing to my channel because I will be covering more of this kind of stuff in future videos. Until next time, I hope you're having a great day, and may the Force be with you. Thanks for watching.